So with the help of Diane, I was finally able to break away from the church and break away from Father Tom and break away from all of the insanity that I had lived with for years now at this point. I was left suffering from anorexia at that point. I was probably 6 feet tall and 130 pounds. I mean, I was skin and bones. I had an eating disorder. I had tics. I was suffering from depression, anxiety, all of this. But for the first time in my life, I knew what love was. And it was really the only thing that saved my life was my relationship with Diane. So I had graduated high school. We had finally told everybody that we were in love with each other. Diane had 2 small children who I had always known that I would never have my own kids. I knew it at a very young age, and I certainly knew it once the abuse started that I just didn't feel equipped emotionally. I didn't have the energy. I was so consumed with just living, just trying to live and just trying to pull myself together. I could never concentrate on school. I had to cheat my way through high school just to make it out, because I really could not concentrate on anything. I was so mixed up, and so my thoughts were so manipulated and controlled. So I went to college, Ramapo College, and it lasted for probably about a month, and I realized that I couldn't concentrate on college either. So I fell back on the only thing that I knew, which was being a creative kid. So I hand painted a sweatshirt. It was Diane and I, it was our first anniversary together. And it was back in probably 1980 at this point now. And I had moved back home with my parents. I hand painted this shirt for Diane. I gave it to her. Now, when Diane's husband left her, he left her with $3, 2 kids, and probably 1 pair of shoes. I mean, he just walked out the door and left her with nothing other than 2 children. She had sent photos of her kids to the Ford agency, Ford Modeling Agency in New York City, which was like the big agency back then, because she was trying to think of a way that she could raise her children. She had no education herself and still be able to be with them. So they were accepted with Ford and became top New York models. And I had painted this sweatshirt for her, and she wore it to a shooting. And everyone said, "Where did you get that shirt? That is so cool. We've never seen anything like that." And she said, "My boyfriend made it." And they said, "Is he a designer?" And she came home and said, "You're a designer now." And I kind of just went with it, very Forrest Gump-like, just like said, okay, I'll buy a dozen sweatshirts, hand paint them, and then before I knew it, I started, cutting. I bought myself, my parents bought me a sewing machine for my 19th birthday, and I can remember going to Sears, and the gentleman, the salesman was directing everything to Diane. This is how you thread the machine, and this is how you do that. And I said, no, it's for me. I'm going to be sewing. He was like, the sewing machine's for you? And I was like, yeah, it's for me. And then little by little, I started making clothes and started bringing them to one store to another, and Diane would be my model. And we would walk in with a rolling rack and not even realizing that this is not the way the industry works, that they go into a showroom and purchase, clothing from a designer. But they were, I guess, charmed when I would walk in with Diane as my model, and they would let me put on this whole fashion little runway act. And little by little, I started selling to stores all throughout the state of New Jersey, all of these little boutiques. And then from New Jersey, we would travel to New York, and we'd get in our little car, and barely would be able to afford the gas, but we would get there. And then little by little, we grew this company with $100 and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And before you knew it, I've had dresses in cosmopolitan magazines, and Dynasty had bought my clothes back in the early 80s, and we were written up in Us magazine, and I started becoming known within the industry, and we had this really incredible company and had a factory right in Bayonne. We were able to buy a house together. We lived together for 2 years, and then we got married in 1989. And we raised our 2 boys together, and I raised them as my own. And life was good. Life was really interesting and great. And I was able to use the only thing that I was left with after the abuse, which was my creativity. And that really was I would say, my source of God. It was almost like my creativity was almost divine intervention, and it really did save my life. And just had wonderful experiences. I ended up designing clothes for Demi Moore and costumed the movie that she did. And I did clothes for The Sopranos and clothes for John Bon Jovi's wife and his baby one holiday. And it was just a really amazing time in our life. And I was able to just totally take all of the negative energy that I had lived with for all of those years, and I was able to funnel it through my creative ability into a world of design and fashion and creativity. And it really did save my life.